so honored to get to be here with you guys this evening as we kick off a new series entitled Take This With You. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about a guy that some of you may have heard of named Tiger Woods. Anybody ever heard of Tiger Woods? What sport? Okay, shout it out. What sport is Tiger Woods known for? Golf, right? Now, if my husband were here, he would be super excited because he loves golf. And he loved Tiger Woods as well. So in 1996, before any of y'all were born, at the age of 21, Tiger became a pro golfer with the PGA circuit. And many would now consider him the greatest golfer of his generation. He has had 82 wins on the PGA Tour. He has earned over $120 million playing golf. Some of you are now thinking that you might get into golf. And because of massive endorsement deals and business ventures, Tiger is currently worth $1.5 billion. Do we have a picture of Tiger? Did y'all put that up? You didn't put that up? Okay. I'm sure y'all could Google it or ask chat to show you a picture. But for much of the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, Tiger was loved by thousands of fans worldwide. He was on the his face was on the cover of multiple magazines. He was in countless commercials. He was hanging out with celebrities. He was doing interview after interview with talk show hosts and sports commentators. Simply put, Tiger Woods was not just a golfer during this time, he was the golfer during this time, okay? But unfortunately, on a November night in 2009, Tiger's popularity and success took a severe hit when he was involved in a domestic dispute with his wife, which then resulted in him crashing his car as he was leaving their home. And it also became public knowledge that the reason they were fighting is because his wife found out that he was not just cheating on her with one woman, but with a lot of women. Just like that, overnight, Tiger went from being a beloved sports icon to a man who began to lose money, sponsorships, family, friends, and the public's respect. But I want you to know, this is very important to know, that Tiger's downfall did not start that November night. It had started years earlier when he began to make choices that betrayed his marriage vows and then attempted to hide those choices among the power and fame that he was achieving in the golf world. Folks, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. That slow decline into some major mistakes. And I want you to understand that oftentimes a catastrophic screw up rarely begins with a catastrophic decision. More often it starts with a series of small compromises, neglected responsibilities, or overlooked warning signs. Now, there's a lot of characters in the Bible who would be a good example of this type of story. But the one we're going to be talking about tonight is a man named Samson. Raise your hand if you have heard of Samson. Okay, that's good. For those of you who have never heard of Samson, I'm going to give you a little backstory. But what we're going to learn through Samson, through his story, we're going to look at 3 ways that we gradually start sliding away from God and closer to a major downfall. So Samson's parents had no children. They were kind of getting up in years, and Samson's mom had never been able to have a child. And in biblical times, this was kind of disgraceful if you didn't have children. So one day, this angel of the Lord comes to Samson's parents and tells them, you're going to have a son. Woo, they're super excited. The angel then goes on to tell them, but there are certain rules that you have to make sure that Samson follows because God has a specific plan and purpose for his life, and you have to make sure that he follows these rules. And God is also going to use Samson as he grows up to begin to deliver the Israelites, who were God's chosen people, from their evil enemy, the Philistines. So there were three things that the angel told Samson's parents. They had to make sure that Samson never drank alcohol, any kind of grape juice, anything from a vineyard or a vine he could not have. They had to make sure that he never ate anything unholy. And they had to make sure that he never, ever, ever cut his hair. Okay, and you're gonna see why as we get deeper into the story. So Samson's parents are like, bet, let's go. We're ready to have a son, okay? So they have Samson, and growing up, his life is a good one. Then one day, after he becomes a young man, he sees this beautiful girl. I bet none of you guys know what that's like. He sees this beautiful girl from an enemy tribe, okay? Now, we don't know if she was from the Philistine tribe, but she was from another enemy tribe. And this tribe in particular, they worshiped idols, okay? They didn't believe in God. They were pagans. They worshiped idols. But Samson thinks she's beautiful, and he wants to marry her, okay? So we're going to pick up his story in Judges chapter 14, verse 3. His father and mother objected. Do we have it on the screen? There it is. His father and mother objected. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites that you could marry? They asked. Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? But Samson told his father, get her for me. She looks good to me. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I would not have talked to my dad that way. I still wouldn't talk to my dad that way, and I'm 47. All right, so Samson doesn't care that she belongs to a pagan tribe. She looks good to him, and he wants her. Point number one, the first way that we gradually slide away from God is that we focus on what pleases us instead of what pleases God. Samson saw a beautiful woman, didn't care that she was from an enemy tribe, and he allowed his wants to compromise God's command. See, way back in the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, God specifically tells his people not to marry people from tribes that are engaged in pagan worship. And the reason God tells them that is because he knew that if they married someone who worshiped idols, they too would soon begin to worship idols as well. So that was a big no-no. This was something that Samson had been taught from the time he was a little boy. This is something that he knew would be disastrous for his faith and for his family, but he allowed his desires to override his self-control, okay? Now think about how this happens in our lives. My husband, Rod, often tells the story about when he was a little boy and he was at the store with his mom. Rod sees this game on the shelf. Now, I think it was like one of those little tiny games where it was like a pinball kind of machine thing. This was in the late 70s, early 80s, so just work with me. So he sees this game on the shelf. He asks his mom if he could have it. She tells him no. So what does Rod do? He slips it into his pocket. They leave the store, and he starts playing it as his mom's driving home. He's in the back seat. He starts playing the game. Well, his mom notices that he's back there playing with something. She asks him what it is. He tells her. She asks him where he got it. He tells her. She immediately turns the car around, drives back to the store, takes Rod by the ear, marches him into the store. This is a good mama. Marches him into the store, makes him return the game to the cashier and apologize for stealing it. Did Rod know that it was wrong to steal that game? Of course he did. That's why he was hiding it from his mama, right? But in that moment, he wasn't focused on the wrong. He was focused on his want. He wanted the game. He didn't care that it was wrong. He took the game. We do, now maybe you don't steal games, okay? But there's other things that you might want in your life that you know you shouldn't have, but you become so focused on them that you do it anyway. Now guys, let me be clear about something. Wanting something is not bad. We all want things, right? Those of you who are getting ready to drive, you want some wheels. That's normal, that's natural, that's a good thing. You want a good grade on an assignment or a test. You want an invitation to the party that you hear about happening. You know, maybe you want a job. Maybe you want to play on a sports team. Those wanting things is not bad. But when we become so focused on what we want that we're willing to compromise our convictions and commit sins that we know are not right, then that's where it's a problem. And this is where Samson messed up as well. He compromised his devotion to God by focusing on the wrong thing. Let's continue his story in Judges 14, verse 5. As Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah, this is a town that they were traveling to, a young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah. At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. I don't know about you, but I would have loved to have seen that. I think that's pretty cool, actually. Later, when he returned to Timnah for the wedding, now this is the wedding of him and this girl that he's about to marry, even though he shouldn't be marrying her. He wanted her, he's gonna marry her. So they're going back to Timnah for the wedding. He turned off the path to look at the carcass, the dead body of the lion that he had just killed previously. He found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. He scooped some of the honey into his hands and ate it along the way. He also gave some to his father and mother, and they ate it. But he didn't tell them that he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. The second way that we slide farther from God is point number 2. We choose compromise over God's calling for our life. Now, I mentioned earlier that when the angel came to Samson's parents, he gave them specific rules that they needed to follow and that they needed to make sure Samson followed because of this special calling that God was placing on his life. What were those? We just talked about them. Let's review. What was the first one? No alcohol. Somebody said it. Couldn't drink alcohol. What was the second one? Huh? He couldn't cut his hair, okay? And what was the other one? He couldn't eat anything unholy. So these rules were a part of the Nazirite vow. Now, Nazirites were a group of people, men and women, who had taken a vow to completely devote their lives to God, okay? They were sold out, completely sold out for God's service. And there were certain rules that they had to follow, 3 of which were the ones we just said. Another one of those rules is that they could not touch any kind of dead body, whether it was an animal or a person, because if they touched a dead body, they became impure, they became defiled. And they would have to go through like this whole ritual process of becoming clean and pure again, okay? So what did Samson just do? He touched the dead body of the lion, right? Samson knew he wasn't supposed to do that. He knew he wasn't supposed to do that. But, what's one way that we know he knew not to do that? What does it tell us in verse 9? He didn't tell his parents. Now, is there anybody in here who's ever done something you knew you shouldn't have done and you didn't tell your parents? What? Oh, I am just shocked. I have never done that myself. Right. Lightning better not strike me. Right. He didn't tell his parents because he knew it was wrong. Just like Rod didn't tell his mama that he took that game because he knew it was wrong. But Samson saw an opportunity and he compromised the command God had given him. Think about it. Back then, they didn't have vehicles, right? So Samson and his parents had been traveling by foot. It could have been hot. It was dusty. They were hungry. They were tired. So Samson may have even thought to himself, you know what? God made that honey. God created that honey. So obviously he wants me to have it. I mean, God made it, right? And then he may have thought, I'm honoring my mom and dad, which is one of the 10 commandments. I'm honoring my mom and dad by providing them with nourishment because I know they're hungry. So I'm sure God won't mind if I take this honey? Do y'all ever tell yourself stuff like that when you know you're doing something you're not supposed to? Do y'all ever try to like rationalize it in your head? I'm gonna tell you something that you may have never heard before, okay? Not every gift from God is meant for you. What? Not every gift from God is meant for you. Melanie, God doesn't want us to have good gifts. That's not what I said. God does want you to have good gifts, but not every one of his gifts is meant for you. I've always wanted to have the gift of singing, okay? But I promise you that if I had been up here on this stage a while ago, it would not have been a worshipful experience, and half of y'all would have left. That's just not the gift that God gave me, okay? It could be a timing thing. It could be that God wants you to have this gift, but it's not the right time. For example, and if you're asleep, this is where I'm gonna wake you up. Sex is a gift that God created and wants his children to enjoy. But newsflash, sex ain't for y'all right now, okay? Sex was created by God for his children when they get married and they are in a marriage covenant. Now, when you get married, go hog wild, have as much sex as you want to, okay? You probably ain't never had anybody tell you that either. But what I'm trying to say is that every gift is not meant for you. God loves us enough to give us the right gifts that we're supposed to have when we need them. So just because God created that honey in the dead lion, and he did create it, God had also given Samson a direct order not to touch a dead body. And God never contradicts himself. He never contradicts himself. You know, guys, God loves Samson so much that if Samson had said, God, we're hungry and we need something to eat, God could have brought down a McDonald's buffet right there in the middle of the road for Samson and his family to have. But instead, Samson took matters into his own hands. He compromised the calling and the command that God had given him and chose to sin against God. Now, some people may read this and they may think, big deal, he touched a dead body. That's not really, that's a small mess up. Maybe so, but as we continue reading, you're gonna see how that small mess up leads to greater lapses in judgment for Samson. For example, throughout the next few chapters of Judges, Samson continues to make poor choices. So the girl that he married that was beautiful and he just had to have, he ends up leaving her because he gets mad and he just leaves her. He kills 30 innocent men, okay? He burns all the grain and vineyards that belong to the Philistines, which in a chain reaction lead to the murder of his wife and father-in-law. He compromises himself again when he uses the jawbone of a donkey, a dead donkey, obviously, to kill 1,000 men. Now, yeah, that's cool, but he still compromised himself to do it. With each sinful act, Samson creates separation, more and more separation between himself and God. Now let's look at the way Samson's story ends. We're gonna pick up in Judges 16, verse 4. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah. Apparently women were one of his weaknesses, okay? He falls in love with a woman named Delilah who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "Entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely." Now, why were they wanting her to do that? So they could get him, so that they could overpower him and capture him, okay? He had killed 1,000 of their men. He had basically made a fool of them by burning all their vineyards and ruining all their crops. So they were out for revenge. They were tired of Samson taking things from them. So they tell Delilah, if you'll do this, each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver, okay? So I'm gonna summarize the next few parts of this for time's sake, but as we just read, Samson falls for Delilah. The Philistines see an opportunity, okay? They come to Delilah, they basically offer her a bribe, saying, if you'll help us out, we'll give you this money. So Delilah, she begins to talk to Samson. Girls, you know how we do. Well, baby, if you really loved me, you'd tell me, how come you so strong? Will you tell me the source of your strength? And Samson's like, whatever, I'll just give her some excuse. I'll just tell her something just so she'll leave me alone. Now, what was the source of his strength? Has anybody figured that out yet? His hair. His hair was the source of his strength. That's why God told his parents, don't ever let him cut his hair. That was the source of his strength. That's how he was able to kill those 1,000 men. That's how he was able to rip the lion apart, okay? So Delilah begins to, butter him up, sweeten him up. And so Samson's like, okay, I'll tell you what causes me to become weak. If you take 7 brand new bowstrings, okay, like strings you would put on a bow and arrow, which are pretty stout, they're pretty tough to break, and you tie me up with these 7 brand new bowstrings, I'll lose all my strength. So Delilah says, okay. So she waits till Samson falls asleep that night. She gets 7 brand new bowstrings. She ties him up. She sneaks in some Philistines into her house. And then she says, Samson, the Philistines are about to get you. Now, I doubt she said it like that, but something like that. So Samson wakes up and he breaks those bowstrings like they were nothing. And then he takes the Philistines down, okay? So now Delilah starts to pout. She's like, if you really love me, you would have told me the truth. I guess you don't love me because you won't tell me. So then, he's wanting to get her off his back. So he's like, okay, if you tie me up with some brand new ropes, tie me up with rope, I'll lose all my strength. So what does she do the next night? Same thing. Ties him up with rope while he's asleep, sneaks in some Philistines. Samson, the Philistines are here. They're about to get you. He wakes up, snaps the ropes, kills the Philistines. Now, before I continue with this part of the story, I want to give you the third way that we move farther from God and closer to failure. Number 3, we ignore the warning signs. We ignore the warning signs. That's called the Holy Spirit. When you're about to do something that you're not supposed to do, and you start getting that little, just kind of like that little angst inside your chest, and maybe your heart's beating really fast, and maybe your hands are getting sweaty, and you're just like, oh man, God. That's the Holy Spirit. He is warning you that this is not for you. Now, in Samson's case, I'm just gonna be real with y'all. If somebody who I thought loved me tied me up while I was asleep and then had a group of people who were my enemies try to capture me 2 different times, I think it would have only taken 1 time, but especially 2 different times, I would have got on up out that house and ran as fast as I could. Is that what Samson did? Samson stayed. He stayed with Delilah. He stayed in her house. So she keeps whining. She keeps nagging. Well, you're just embarrassing me. You're not telling me the truth. Why won't you tell me what makes you so strong? Why are you lying to me? Don't you love me? So Samson says, if you will take the 7 locks of my hair, which were kind of like 7 braids of his hair, and weave them into the fabric on your loom. Now, a loom was like, if you've seen the Odyssey which is an amazing movie, by the way. You've seen a loom. It's like this big structure that people in these times would use to make fabric, to make blankets, to make, clothes, I don't know. So he says, if you will braid my hair into the fabric on your loom, then I'll lose all my strength. So, once again, he falls asleep. She ties his hair in the fabric on the loom, sneaks in some Philistines. Samson, they're here to get you. He pulls his hair out like it's nothing, kills the Philistines. Now, girls, by this time, Delilah is mad. She is mad, and she's done. She's done. So she starts nagging and nagging and nagging and whining and pouting and crying and being all dramatic like us girls can be sometimes. So finally, he's just like, oh my gosh, this woman. And so he tells her the truth. He tells her, it's my hair. My hair is the source of my strength. If somebody cuts my hair off, I lose all my strength. Okay? Let's look at Judges 16, verse 18. Delilah realized that he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine rulers. Come back one more time, for he has finally told me his secret. So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and then she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. Then she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, he thought, I'll do as before and shake myself free. But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. If you don't know what gouge means, that means they literally tore out his eyeballs. Okay? They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. Did y'all notice the underlined part of verse 20? It's the saddest part in this whole story. When Samson tried to fight back, my Texas is coming out. When Samson tried to fight back, he didn't realize the Lord had left him. Wow. Samson had gotten so caught up in focusing on what pleased him, compromising God's call in his life, and ignoring the warning signs that he became totally blind to the warning signs altogether and headed straight into a catastrophic downfall. He was so deep in his sin that he didn't even realize that God's presence had left him. Now, how many of you know what this is? If you're live in America, you should. So, this is Jenga, and Jenga's a fun little game. My kids love. Well, Charlotte loves to play it. So Charlotte's my 6-year-old. Charlotte loves to play it. My 5-year-old son, RJ, loves to come and knock it all down when she's playing it. So that's fun to hear that screaming and fighting going on. Okay, so Samson's selfishness, wanting the girl that he wasn't supposed to have. Okay, that was one sin. Samson's pride, ordering his father around. Go and get her for me, thinking that he was untouchable, right? Samson choosing to be unholy by touching the dead animal, even though he knew he wasn't supposed to. Samson murdering the 30 innocent men who had nothing to do with him at all, and he just totally went into their village and killed them because he was mad. Samson leaving his wife after he had wanted to do everything he could, including sinning against God, to get her. Samson going and destroying all the crops and vineyards of the Philistines, and then that deception leading to the murder of his wife and father-in-law. That was another sin. Him completely just ignoring God's call in his life, not caring, wanting to take matters into his own hands. Him living with a woman that he wasn't married to and letting her trick him and deceive him, even though he saw, even though the Holy Spirit was trying to warn him and he didn't listen. So all of these things, time after time, kept on, right? He continued to sin against God. He continued to play with fire, even though he knew that he shouldn't, right? All of these little things. And so eventually, the more that he plays around, what happens? He gets captured, right? Now guys, girls, let me ask you something. Which one of those blocks made that tower fall? Some would say the last one. I heard someone say the first one. The answer is all of them. Every little block that I was pulling out eventually led to this tower completely falling down. Now, growing up, I always thought the story of Samson was really cool, okay? I was a tomboy when I was little, so hearing about the way that he just ripped that line apart and the way he just took that donkey jawbone and killed all those people, I thought that was really cool. And growing up, I really only ever heard the part of this story that concerned him and Delilah. So I thought that Delilah was the main source of his downfall. It wasn't until I got much older that I read the whole story and realized that all those little compromises and all those little decisions that he was making along the way is what led to his major downfall. Hebrews 2:1 says, "So we must listen very carefully to the truth we have heard, or we might drift away from it." If you've ever been on a boat or watched something like floating on the water, does it happen fast? No, it's very gradual, right? It's a very slow, gradual movement. Now, the Message translation of this verse puts it this way: it's crucial that we keep a firm grip on what we've heard so that we do not drift off. I love that interpretation. It is crucial. Crucial means super important that we keep a firm grip on the truth of God. Samson has messed up big time. Now he's blind. He's being used as a slave by the Philistines. And if this is where his story ended, that would be really discouraging for us as believers. But the more we learn about God, we learn that he is a God of second chances. He is a God of forgiveness. He is a God of redemption. And there's about to be a major plot twist in this story. And it starts with this verse, Judges 16:22. "But before long, his hair began to grow back." Boom, boom, boom. Now, this is where you could easily insert that GIF of the guy with the big thing of popcorn, and he's just sitting there like this, like, oh, I'm just ready to watch it. What was the source of Samson's strength? What was the source of Samson's strength? His hair. It is growing back. He is about to go off on these Philistines. Even though he's blind, even though he's in chains, the power of God is coming back into his life, and he is about to go off on these Philistines. He may have been defeated, he may have been enslaved, but the source of his supernatural strength is coming back, and God is about to fulfill the promise that he made to Samson's parents when he told them that Samson would deliver them from the Philistines. Now, Samson's here. He's enslaved. Well, he's like underground at this palace where the Philistines are, okay, the Philistine rulers. Well, they have a big party one night. They invite all the Philistine, leaders and their wives and just tons of, like thousands. It says there were like thousands of Philistines there, okay? And this huge, ornate, beautiful palace. And they were up on the roof of the palace, partying, eating, drinking, having a good time. Well, one of the Philistine leaders said, "Bring out Samson so he can entertain us." Basically, they wanted him to come out so that they could make fun of him and laugh at him as their source of entertainment. So one of the servants, he brings Samson out. Samson, he has, bandages around his eyes because, they're yucky, disgusting looking. He's blind. He's in chains, right? The servant brings him out, and Samson tells the servant to put him over by these two huge pillars. Y'all know what a pillar is, right? It's something that like holds up a structure, okay? So he tells the servant to put him up beside these two pillars. We pick up in Judges 16:28. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me again. Oh God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my two eyes." Then Samson put his hands on the two center pillars that held up the temple, and pushing against them with both hands, he prayed, "Let me die with the Philistines." And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. Now, is that part of the story still tragic? Yeah. Samson lost his life. But did God still use him in a mighty way? Yeah. Because now the Philistine rulers are dead. So God is fulfilling the promise that he made to Samson's parents. Samson knew he had blown it. He had become prideful and selfish and had hit rock bottom, so he humbled himself and asked God for help. That's all God had been waiting on. That's all God is waiting on from you tonight. For you to just humble yourself and ask for help. God never wanted to see Samson fail. That was never his plan for Samson. He only wanted good things for him, just like he wants for you and me. So God answered Samson's final prayer. He destroyed the Philistines and he began to set the Israelites free. Despite Samson's tragic mistakes, God still used him in a mighty way. And God still wants to do the same thing with us. Now, there was a specific time in my life when I was walking through a very, very dark season. The weight of it was heavy. And even though I knew God was with me, there was times that I still felt very, very alone. Because of that loneliness, I started compromising my convictions and began making some decisions that weren't God's best for me. My choices would make me feel good in the moment, but afterwards I knew I was getting dangerously close to crossing some lines that could really hurt me. I was focused on what pleased me instead of what pleased God. I was choosing to compromise the calling that God had for me, and as much as I hate to admit it now, I was totally ignoring the warning signs. Thankfully, I had godly friends who were bold enough to call me out. Those are the kind of friends you need. And let me know that if I continued on the path that I was on, I was going to make a huge mistake. By God's grace, I listened to those friends. I refocused my eyes on Jesus. Now, that wasn't easy. It meant that I had to let go of some things. It meant I had to let go of some people. And it wasn't easy asking God to forgive me either, because I knew I had been really stupid and I felt really ashamed. But you know what? God didn't see me through a lens of shame and sin. He saw me the same way that he sees every single one of you, even those of you that aren't paying attention to me right now. He sees us through a lens of absolute, undeniable love. After I turned back to God, you know what he did? He still blessed me. He still blessed me. He didn't rub it in my face that I had messed up. He didn't withhold his goodness from me because I had made mistakes. He still blessed me. Did I deserve his blessings? Absolutely not. But he blessed me because even though I messed up, he still wanted to fulfill his plan for my life and give me good things. You see, like Samson, I thought that what I was chasing was what was best for me. But God knew that he had a lot more in store for me. I can honestly tell you tonight that if I had not turned back to God in that season, I would not be married to my amazing husband, Rod, and I would not have my 2 amazing kids who love Jesus. I would have missed out on that, guys. I would have missed out on that. Can you imagine? Regardless of what you've done or what you're thinking about doing, and let's be honest, some of you were faced with some decisions right before you got here tonight. Decisions that you had to decide if you were gonna flirt with that line that you knew you shouldn't cross. Regardless of what you've done or what you're thinking about doing, God loves you. God has a purpose for your life, and he still wants to bless you in ways that you could never imagine. All you have to do is do what Samson did. All you have to do is cry out for God to help you. All you have to do is humble yourself, admit that you're struggling, and ask God for help. That's all he's waiting on. He is just waiting for you to say the word. You know what hit me, what occurred to me when we were singing? I think it may have been the 3rd song, or maybe the 2nd. There was a line in the song that said, "I was blind, but now I can see." Samson did not see God until he had his eyes taken out of his head. He did not see God until he was literally blinded by his choices. I think, I mean, it was horrible that he had to lose his sight, but if that's what it took to get him to actually see God and see all that God wanted to do for him and see how much God loved him, then I believe Samson would tell us it was totally worth it.